19 black celebrities who had the most unusual body parts. What if the very thing the world laughed at became the reason a person changed history? Tonight on Legends of Black Excellence, we're diving into 19 jaw-dropping real-life cases, people born with bodies so rare, so unexpected that doctors, bullies, and even the spotlight couldn't explain them. A man who lived 555 days with no heartbeat. A sprinter whose 2 long legs became the fastest ever. Models whose skin scars or limbs shattered every beauty rule. Stay with me because these stories will flip how you see normal. If you're ready, hit like, subscribe, and comment which story shocked you first. Waris Dirie. Waris Dirie's life moves like a hard-earned victory song, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. She was born on October 21, 1965, into a nomadic Somali family near Galkayo, growing up in a world of goat's dust and long walks for water. At 5, she was subjected to female genital cutting, an experience that left lasting damage and shaped the way she understood power over a girl's body. When she was 13 and told she would be married off to an older man, Waris ran away. She crossed the desert with no map, no money, and only the stubborn belief that another life had to exist. Here's something to ask yourself: if you carried a wound like that, would you ever speak it out loud? London was her turning point. She worked as a domestic helper, learned English, and tried to survive in a city that felt colder than any night back home. A chance meeting with photographer Terrence Donovan changed everything. Waris rose through the fashion world in the late 1980s and 1990s, modeling for major houses and beauty brands, becoming a striking black presence in an industry that rarely made space for women who looked like her. But fame wasn't her finish line. In 1998, her autobiography, Desert Flower, exposed the reality of genital cutting to a global audience, and later adaptations broadened that impact. She went on to serve as a United Nations ambassador against FGM and founded the Desert Flower Foundation to support survivors and help prevent the practice through education and medical care. Her legacy isn't just runway history, it's the way she turned a private scar into public protection for millions. Koudia Diop. Koudia Diop grew up in Dakar, Senegal, carrying a beauty the world hadn't learned to celebrate yet. Born in 1996, she was nicknamed the Melanin Goddess years later, but her early life sounded nothing like a compliment. Her complexion, deep, glossy, and richly dark, made her a target for cruel jokes at school and even sideways looks from adults. Instead of shrinking, she began to build a quiet armor self-belief. As a teenager, she dreamed of fashion, but Senegal's local scene offered limited space for someone who didn't match lighter-skinned standards, still echoed by colorism. So at 17, she left for France, hoping distance might bring freedom. In Paris, the stares didn't stop until one day a photographer approached her in a park and told her something she'd rarely heard. "You are stunning." That single moment cracked open a new path. Her first photos spread rapidly online, not as a spectacle, but as a revelation. Social media for once worked like a spotlight instead of a mirror, and Koudia stepped into it with purpose. She began modeling internationally, appearing in campaigns and editorials that celebrated her skin not as an exception, but as a standard of its own. What makes Koudia's story resonate, especially for older viewers who've seen beauty trends come and go, is that she didn't change herself to be accepted. She changed the room. Young girls now approach her saying they no longer feel ashamed of being too dark. Koudia answers with calm pride, "Your shade is not a problem to solve. It's a heritage to honor." Mahogany Guider. Mahogany Guider didn't step into the spotlight because the fashion world was ready for her. She stepped in because she was ready for herself. Raised in Tennessee, Mahogany was born with primary lymphedema, a chronic condition that causes severe swelling in her left leg. For years, that leg drew the kind of attention no child wants, pointing, whispering nicknames that sting long after the hallway empties. Shopping for clothes was frustrating. Gym class felt like a battlefield, and every public outing carried the risk of someone treating her body like a curiosity. If strangers stared at your difference every day, would you still walk proudly into the room? What's remarkable is how she answered that question with action. As a young adult, Mahogany began posting photos online not to ask permission to be seen, but to declare she already was. Her images traveled fast, and people who had never heard the word lymphedema suddenly wanted to know her story. Brands started reaching out. She moved toward modeling with a boldness that refused pity, and her presence on runways quietly challenged a narrow idea of what fit for fashion looks like. Mahogany also chose to educate, not merely pose. She speaks about the physical reality, pain, heaviness, relentless flare-ups, and the emotional cost of growing up under constant judgment. Yet she never frames herself as broken. She frames herself as whole, adapting with strength and humor. For many viewers, especially those who've lived long enough to carry their own scars, Mahogany's journey lands as a powerful reminder. Confidence isn't the absence of hardship. It's what you build in response to it. Double Dick Dude? The man the internet dubbed Double Dick Dude is less a tabloid figure than a reminder of how wildly varied human biology can be. In the transcript, he's described as being born with diphallia penile duplication, an exceptionally rare congenital condition. Medical summaries estimate it happens in roughly 1 out of 5 to 6 million live male births, and only around 100 cases have been formally documented in modern records. That means most doctors will never see a case firsthand. Diphallia also doesn't look the same in every person. Sometimes both organs are fully formed, sometimes one is smaller, and the condition can come alongside other urinary or anatomical differences. What matters most in his story isn't shock value, it's the emotional choice he faced. Growing up, he reportedly felt isolated during the years when teenagers are trying hardest to blend in. As an adult, doctors suggested surgery, which is often recommended in diphallia cases, to reduce complications and make daily life simpler. But he chose not to remove anything, explaining that he didn't want to correct himself just to satisfy other people's comfort. Instead, he shared his experience publicly in a careful human way, emphasizing that self-worth doesn't depend on matching a textbook diagram. Even though his real identity remains private and his fame is mostly internet-driven, his message lands clearly: for any generation, being different doesn't automatically mean being broken. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is stop apologizing for the body they were born with. Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington carries a small mark of imperfection that never dimmed his command of the screen. Long before awards and red carpets, he was a kid in Mount Vernon, New York, learning discipline in a tight-knit, church-rooted household. Somewhere along the way, by most accounts through a childhood injury, his right pinky healed at a sharp angle. It's noticeable if you look for it, especially when he points or grips a microphone, yet it never became a limitation. Instead, it quietly traveled with him into every chapter: college athlete, theater student, working actor, and eventually one of America's most respected performers. Have you ever had a physical quirk that people noticed first, even before they knew your name? What makes Denzel's bent finger meaningful isn't the shape itself, but the way he refused to let anyone reduce him to it. Early in his career, Hollywood was still narrow about what leading men should look like. He pushed through by being undeniable through focus craft and presence that fills a room without needing to shout. From Glory to Training Day to Fences, he built a legacy on intensity and truth, not flawless anatomy. Over time, that crooked pinky became almost symbolic proof that greatness doesn't require polish, only purpose. Older viewers often read his journey as a lesson in dignity. He didn't overcome his finger by hiding it. He simply outgrew the noise around it. And every time he raises a hand on screen, bent pinky included, he shows that the smallest irregularity can sit right beside the largest achievements. Damon Wayans. Damon Wayans built a career out of making people laugh at life's awkward angles, including his own. Born in Harlem in 1960 and raised in a big, noisy family that didn't have much money but had plenty of personality, Damon learned early that humor could be both shield and sword. He has a naturally bow-legged stance, something kids noticed fast. In neighborhoods where toughness mattered, that kind of difference could invite jokes, and for a while it did. But instead of folding inward, he leaned outward into wit timing and the kind of physical comedy you don't learn in a classroom. By the time he reached the stage, that distinctive gait wasn't a weakness. It was part of his rhythm. You can see it in the way he moves loose elastic slightly off-center in a way that makes a punchline land harder. His breakout years with In Living Color showed America a comedian who could shift from goofy to sharp in a heartbeat. Then came films like Major Payne and Mo Money, and later the long-running success of My Wife and Kids, where he proved he wasn't just a sketch star, but a storyteller who understood family pride and everyday struggle. What's lasting about Damon isn't just the laughs, it's the lesson underneath them. He never waited for the world to approve his body before he lived boldly in it. He made the difference part of the performance, and in doing so reminded millions that confidence isn't something you're handed, it's something you decide. Joseph Williams. Joseph Williams came into the world in Chicago with a condition so uncommon that it rewrote every ordinary expectation. He was born with otofacial syndrome, which meant he developed without a lower jaw. From childhood onward, daily living required medical ingenuity and relentless patience, repeated operations, assisted breathing at times, and lifelong dependence on a feeding tube. He has shared that he has never chewed a meal or tasted food the way most of us take for granted. Communication, too, demanded creativity. Instead of spoken language, he built fluency in sign facial expression and a digital voice that helps translate his thoughts for people who don't know his hands. If your voice couldn't come through your mouth, where would you search for it? Joseph found his answer in sound itself. He fell in love with music not as a singer, but as a sculptor of rhythm. By feel, vibration, and memory, he taught himself to DJ and began performing under the name DJ Brown Sugar V. He learned equipment through repetition, reading cues with his eyes and trusting timing in his bones. Online videos of his sets show something striking, not a man defined by absence, but a performer fully present in his craft. The crowd doesn't respond out of sympathy, they respond because the mix is good. His personal life carries the same quiet defiance. For years, he assumed romance was out of reach, worn down by stares and the fear of rejection. Then he met Vanya through work in 2019. What started as friendship grew into a partnership, and the two later married, speaking openly about love, built on steadiness, humor, and mutual respect. Joseph's life isn't a spectacle. It's a blueprint for how spirit can outplay circumstance. Stan Larkin. Stan Larkin's journey sounds like something out of science fiction, yet it unfolded in plain, everyday America. He grew up in Michigan as a tall, energetic kid who loved basketball and normal teenage life. Then at 16, everything cracked open, he collapsed during a game, and specialists diagnosed him with familial cardiomyopathy, a hereditary disease that silently weakens the heart muscle. Over the next few years, his condition deteriorated, and in 2014, doctors made a decision that still feels unbelievable. His failing heart was removed and replaced with a total artificial heart. To stay alive, Stan carried a portable power unit called a driver in a backpack that weighed about 13.5 pounds, running the mechanical heart inside his chest. Stan chose life. For 555 days, over a year and a half, he lived without a natural heartbeat. The backpack pushed blood through his body, letting him leave the hospital, spend time with family, and do small, careful activities while waiting for a donor. Imagine planning your entire day around batteries, cords, and the steady hum that never stops. Even sleep required strategy, positioning the lines, protecting the equipment, and waking up ready to do it again. Through it all, he kept his spirit steady, refusing to be defined by the technology keeping him alive. In May 2016, a donor heart finally arrived and the transplant succeeded. Stan's story isn't only about cutting-edge medicine. It's about a young man who treated each borrowed day as something to use, not just to endure. Caleb Mutambara. Caleb Mutambara, more widely spelled Caleb Mutombo in international coverage, is a Congolese-born bodybuilder whose physique defies both medical odds and gym stereotypes. He entered the world with sickle cell anemia, a genetic blood disorder that can cause chronic pain fatigue and reduced oxygen delivery. In Caleb's case, the disease also contributed to severe limb deformities and dramatically limited growth. As a young boy, his family traveled from the Democratic Republic of Congo to South Africa seeking treatment. Money ran out. His parents returned to Congo, and Caleb grew up largely under the care of an orphanage community. That early abandonment could have hardened him into silence, yet it did the opposite. When your body feels like it's working against you, do you quit or do you get creative? Caleb got creative. Around age 12, he began lifting whatever he could find: water bottles, books, homemade weights, because organized sports were often impossible for him. Over time, the tiny room where he trained became his proving ground. As a teenager, he stood only about 110 centimeters tall, 3'7", and weighed under 40 kilos, about 88 kg. But he kept showing up to gyms that were built for larger frames. Coaches and competitors noticed not pity, but precision, his control symmetry and relentless practice. He eventually stepped onto South African bodybuilding stages, earning awards for determination and presentation. Off stage, he promotes a blunt motto often paraphrased as, "Weakness is a choice not to shame others, but to challenge assumptions about disability." Caleb's legacy isn't about size, it's about refusing to let biology write the final draft of who you are. Ben Underwood. Ben Underwood became famous not because he wanted attention, but because his brain found a way to do what most people think is impossible. He was born on January 26, 1992 in California. At just 2 years old, he was diagnosed with retinoblastoma, a rare aggressive eye cancer. By age 3, both eyes had to be removed to save his life. For many families, that would mark the end of a child's independence. For Ben, it became the start of something astonishing. Around age 5, Ben began using human echolocation. He clicked his tongue sharp, steady sounds and listened to the echoes bouncing back from walls, trees, curbs, and door frames. Those echoes became a mental map. With practice, he could ride a bike, play basketball, run through hallways, and move with the confidence of a sighted kid. Scientists later noted that echolocation can activate areas of the brain normally used for vision, and Ben was one of the clearest real-life examples of that kind of neuroplasticity. National media featured him as the boy who sees with sound, and audiences were stunned by how naturally he navigated spaces that should have been dangerous. Yet at home, he was still a teenager who loved video games, friends, and joking with his mom, Aquanetta Gordon, who never treated him as fragile. Tragically, the same cancer returned and spread. Ben died on January 19, 2009 in Elk Grove, California at 16 years old, 1 week before his 17th birthday. His legacy isn't a miracle tale. It's proof that the human mind can carve light out of silence. Troy James. Troy James is the kind of performer who makes you blink twice and lean closer to the screen. Known in the industry as Twisty Troy, he's a Toronto-based contortionist and creature actor whose joints seem to ignore the usual rules of anatomy. As a kid, that extreme bendiness brought teasing and isolation, so he spent years hiding what felt too strange for everyday life. Over time, though, he began training seriously, turning a natural hypermobility into disciplined craft, practicing control timing and endurance the way a dancer rehearses a solo. When a talent scares other people, do you lock it away or learn to steer it? Hollywood eventually came calling, not for small parts, but for nightmares. Troy's flexibility helped shape some of modern horror's most memorable figures: Pretzel Jack in Channel Zero, the Dream Door Rag Doll on The Flash, Baba Yaga in Hellboy 2019, and the unnerving Jangly Man in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark 2018. He also appeared in projects like The Void and The Strain, where his body language creates fear without a single line of dialogue. In interviews, Troy explains that many of his movements are practical, done in real time with minimal digital trickery, meaning the audience is watching a human being, not a computer effect. What makes Troy compelling for viewers of any age isn't just the eerie shapes he can form. It's the reversal of shame into artistry. He took a trait once labeled freakish and built a career that proves uniqueness can be a livelihood, not a life sentence. Ralph Souffrant. Ralph Souffrant walked into fashion the way a comet cuts across a night sky, unexpected, bright, and impossible to ignore. Born in Haiti on April 28, 1995, he moved to Brooklyn at 9, carrying memories of a tough childhood where daily needs weren't guaranteed. In New York, school brought a new kind of hardship. A dense constellation of freckles across his face and torso made him an easy target for teasing. Because freckles are uncommon on darker skin, classmates treated them like a flaw instead of a feature. Ralph tried hiding under hoodies and keeping his head down, yet every mirror was a reminder that he couldn't erase what he was born with. Everything shifted when a photographer noticed him and urged him to post his look online. Instagram became his runway before any catwalk did. The response was immediate. People weren't staring to mock anymore. They were staring because they'd never seen beauty expressed quite like that. Within months, he signed with Request Model Management and debuted in Kanye West's Yeezy Season 3 show, a breakout moment that placed him among the most recognizable male faces of that era. He later appeared in major editorials and campaigns often styled to highlight, not soften, his freckled pattern. What makes Ralph's rise matter isn't only the aesthetics. It's the quiet reversal. A trait that once isolated him became the exact reason doors opened. His presence tells older viewers a timeless truth style changes, standards swing, but self-acceptance ages well. Winnie Harlow. Winnie Harlow's story begins with a diagnosis most children don't even know how to pronounce. Born Chantel Brown Young in Mississauga, Ontario in 1994. To Jamaican parents, she developed vitiligo at age 4, a condition that causes areas of skin to lose pigment in unpredictable patches. In elementary school, those contrasting shapes made her a target. She was called names, stared at in the lunchroom, and sometimes pushed to the edges of games as if her appearance were contagious. By early adolescence, she was battling anxiety and the kind of loneliness that can feel louder than any classroom. When a crowd decides you're different, do you try to disappear, or do you make them look again? Winnie chose the second path, though it took time. She began posting photos online first as a way to reclaim her mirror, then as a quiet act of courage. That visibility led to a turning point in 2014 when she competed on America's Next Top Model. She didn't win the season, but she won something more valuable: national recognition as someone who refused to apologize for her skin. Offers followed beauty campaigns, magazine covers, and high-profile appearances that treated her as an artist of expression rather than a medical curiosity. Over the years, Winnie has used interviews and public talks to explain vitiligo in plain terms, stressing that it isn't painful or dangerous, just different. Her presence has helped shift how older and younger audiences define elegance, proving that symmetry is not the only doorway to grace. Today, she stands as a living reminder that what once drew ridicule can become a signature the world learns to celebrate. Meki Alante Lucky. Meki Alante Lucky's rise is one of those modern American twists where a single photograph changes the direction of a life. He grew up in North Carolina in a rough environment where trouble was common and expectations were low. As a teenager, Meki drifted into street fights and petty crime, a path that landed him in police custody in 2016. The mugshot taken that day might have ended as a private mistake, except for one striking detail: the camera captured his eyes. Meki has heterochromia, meaning each iris is a different color, one a vivid light blue, the other a deep brown. The contrast is so rare and arresting that once the image hit social media, people shared it by the millions. Meki chose to rewrite it. He leaned into the attention without glamorizing the arrest, understanding that the fascination wasn't about his record, but about his look and the possibility of transformation. Modeling agencies reached out. He took the opportunity seriously, learning posture grooming professionalism and the discipline needed to keep doors open. Soon he was working shoots, walking castings, and building a career that felt worlds away from the streets he came from. What makes Mackey's journey resonate especially for an older audience is the theme of second chances. His eyes may have opened the first door, but it was his decision to step through with humility that kept him moving forward. Today, he represents more than a viral face. He's a reminder that a person is not frozen in their worst chapter, and that even a public mistake can become the start of a better life when someone finally decides to change. Usain Bolt. Usain Bolt's legend began long before the world called him Lightning. He was born on August 21, 1986 in Sherwood, Content, a rural Jamaican community where kids raced barefoot on uneven ground for fun. Even as a child, Bolt stood out literally. He shot up fast, growing tall and wiry with legs so long that he looked almost off balance when he ran. Teachers teased him for being clumsy, and other boys joked that he moved like a baby deer still learning its steps. Yet those same legs were quietly storing power like a spring waiting to be released. Have you ever had a feature you once felt awkward about, only to realize later it was your hidden advantage? Bolt loved cricket and soccer, but sprinting kept pulling him back because he kept winning. Coaches noticed that while he wasn't the quickest starter once he opened up his stride, he devoured the track with fewer steps than anyone else. At 6'5", 195 Mian, he didn't fit the old stereotype that shorter runners dominate short races. He shattered that myth in front of the whole planet. In Beijing 2008, he stunned the Olympics with a 100-meter world record of 9.69 seconds, then topped it at the 2009 World Championships in Berlin, with 9.58 seconds, still the fastest 100-meter ever recorded. In that same Berlin night, he set the 200-meter record at 19 seconds, another mark untouched since. Across his career, he collected 8 Olympic gold medals and became a global symbol of speed done with joy. Bolt's greatness wasn't only numbers. It was the way he turned too long, too lanky into history, proving that the body you're given can become the body that changes the game. Stephen Wiltshire. Stephen Wiltshire is often called the human camera, but that nickname only begins to describe what makes his life so extraordinary. He was born on April 24, 1974 in London to Caribbean parents, and by the age of 3 he was diagnosed with autism. In early childhood, he was largely non-verbal, and the world around him felt loud, fast, and confusing. But inside his mind, images were forming with astonishing clarity. At school, teachers noticed that when Stephen couldn't connect through speech, he connected through drawing. He started with animals and vehicles, then shifted toward buildings, bridges, and entire streets. London became his first visual language. Stephen's rare ability is this: after seeing a place only once, he can reproduce it from memory in scale and detail that seem almost impossible. Over the years, he has taken short helicopter rides over famous cities, and then drawn vast panoramas that capture not just the skyline, but the structure of neighborhoods, roof patterns, window grids, street spacing, and landmark proportions. His drawings are so accurate that architects and city planners have praised the precision. One of his most famous works is a multi-meter New York City panorama he completed after a single brief flight, sketching block after block with breathtaking exactness. By his teens, Stephen was publishing collections of his art and receiving international commissions. In adulthood, he earned major honors in Britain for his contributions to art and opened a gallery in central London, cementing his place not as a curiosity, but as a respected professional. Stephen's unusual body part isn't something visible on the surface. It's a mind that stores the world like film, then releases it through the calm scratch of a pen, reminding us that genius often speaks in ways we don't expect. Richard Sandrak. Richard Sandrak's childhood looked like a comic book fantasy, but behind the glossy magazine covers was a far more complicated reality. Born in Luhansk, Ukraine on April 15, 1992, He moved to the United States as a toddler with parents who were deeply rooted in fitness, a martial arts champion father, and an aerobics competitor mother. Training started almost as soon as he could walk. By age 5, he was reportedly doing hundreds of push-ups and squats daily and spending hours in disciplined workouts. The world soon met him as Little Hercules, a pint-sized boy with sharply defined muscles and strength that stunned talk shows. At 6, he was said to bench press around 180 pounds, and by 8 headlines, claimed even higher numbers. If your childhood was scheduled like a job, would you know where you ended and the expectations began? As fame grew, so did concern. Doctors questioned whether a body that lean and muscular was safe for a child, and media reports later described an environment of intense pressure at home. In 2003, Richard called police during a violent incident involving his father and mother, an event that led to his father's arrest and removal from the household. After that rupture, Richard gradually stepped away from competitive bodybuilding. By his mid-teens, he chose a more normal routine, focusing on general fitness rather than extreme sculpting. As an adult, Sandrak has spoken with distance and clarity about those early years, grateful for what he achieved, yet honest about the cost. Today, he lives a quieter life, keeping exercise as a healthy habit instead of a spotlight. His story isn't just about muscles. It's about reclaiming autonomy and learning that real strength includes the freedom to grow up on your own terms. Zion Clark. Zion Clark's life is the kind of story that reminds you how stubborn the human spirit can be. He was born in Columbus, Ohio, on September 29, 1997, without legs because of caudal regression syndrome. His earliest years were anything but stable. He entered foster care as an infant and moved through several homes before being adopted in his teens. That kind of start can leave a person feeling rootless, but Zion turned it into a fire to belong somewhere on his own terms. He found that place in wrestling. At Massillon, Washington High School, Zion began wrestling with almost no wins. The losses were public and painful, yet he treated them like lessons instead of verdicts. He rebuilt himself around what he did have: explosive shoulders, a powerful core, quick hands, and a mind that learned angles and leverage better than anyone expected. Day after day, he drilled technique, studied opponents, and trained past fatigue. By his senior year, he had transformed into a genuine competitor, finishing with a winning record and earning respect because he was good, not because he was different. Zion's athletic reach kept expanding. He became famous for his speed walking on his hands, eventually setting a Guinness World Record for the fastest 20 meters on hands in 4.78 seconds. He also competed in wheelchair racing and moved into mixed martial arts, winning his professional debut and speaking openly about chasing big dreams in multiple arenas. What makes Zion unforgettable isn't only the records. It's the way he proves that limits often live in other people's imaginations, not in the person who refuses to quit. Gabriel Monjane. Gabriel Estevan Monjane, often called the Giant of Manjacaze, was born in 1944 in Gaza Province, Mozambique, and his life unfolded at a height most of us can barely imagine. From childhood, he began growing at an abnormal rate because of gigantism linked to an overactive pituitary gland. By his late teens, he was already well over 7 feet tall, and adulthood brought him to an officially measured 8 feet 0.75 inches, 245.7 centimeters. At that size, even simple tasks, finding shoes, fitting through doorways, sitting in a bus seat, became daily negotiations with a world built for smaller bodies. His weight was recorded around 348 pounds, 158 kilos, a frame that drew awe, but also strain on his joints and spine. If every room you entered was too small for you, would you still step forward with confidence? Monjane found work as a circus performer during the Portuguese colonial era, traveling through Portugal and other European countries, where crowds paid to see a man who looked almost mythical in scale. Yet behind the spectacle was a quiet human story: a husband, a father, and a man trying to live with dignity despite constant public scrutiny. Guinness World Records listed him as the tallest living man in their 1988 edition, a title that brought attention but didn't soften the physical cost. In later years, he suffered significant leg and hip problems, common for people with extreme height, and mobility became harder. He died in Maputo on January 21, 1990, after a fall at home only 45 years old. Gabriel Monjane's legacy isn't just his measurement in a record book. It's the reminder that even the most extraordinary body is carrying an ordinary hope to be seen as more than a curiosity and to be remembered as fully human. These 19 stories remind us that Black excellence isn't a single look. It's resilience, reinvention, and pride in bodies the world once labeled wrong. From scars turned into activism to skin limbs, hearts, eyes, and minds that rewrote what beauty and strength mean, each life shows that difference can be destiny. But here's the uncomfortable question: when we share these tales, are we honoring people or turning their rare traits into entertainment? Does spotlighting unusual body parts dismantle stigma, or does it quietly recycle it? You decide. Legends of Black excellence. Drop your view below and challenge someone who disagrees with respect.